We've been taking a walk through Proverbs chapter 14, and last week we landed on verse 23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. And we sat there last week and talked about that verse. That basically what Solomon is saying, and we know to be true, that just talking about something never accomplishes anything. You actually have to do some hard work to get the job done. And I mentioned to you, and there were a lot of nods last week of, being in those meetings where everybody talks about what somebody needs to do. Nobody ever does it. Nobody ever gets around to taking responsibility. Next week you have the same meeting with the same discussion. And the next week you have the same meeting with the same discussion. And at this stage of my life in those jobs, I do not have the authority or the position to say, we've been talking about this for 3 weeks. Who's going to do something about this? But that's what I'm thinking the whole time I'm sitting there. This is the 4th time I've heard you say somebody needs to fix this. Mere talk leads to nothing being done. But what caught my attention is all hard work brings a profit. And again, I told you last week, I know I have had days, and I'm sure you've had days, when you got to the end of the day and you said, there wasn't any profit in this day at all. I don't think I got anything accomplished. I'm not quite sure anything positive happened today. So what in the world is Solomon saying? Well, the word profit, it's not a financial word. It includes that, but it really means gain or value. In all hard work, there is value. There is gain. We are honest and acknowledge that everybody I know, without exception, I believe I can say, everybody I know who is working because they need to make money to live. Most people don't get up in the morning and say, yippee, man, if I didn't even get paid, I'd go to my job today. I told you last week, people who say if they win the lottery, they will keep working, don't deserve to win the lottery. And we work because that's in God's structure. That's how we make a living and how we provide. But not all of us work for finances. Not all of our labor is tied directly to money. And Solomon is saying that everything we do, that's that word labor, it encompasses anything and everything that God has you doing right now. In all of that labor, there is gain. It may be a paycheck. It may be just somebody expressing appreciation to you. It may be finishing a task and feeling a sense of accomplishment. It may be that you've learned a skill. It may be that you've developed a character trait like patience or dependability or faithfulness or creativity. It may be that your labor that day was helping somebody else. It may be that the gain that you accomplished is that you learned something about yourself that you didn't realize. It may be that later in life you'll look back on this stage of your labor and say, what do you know? God was using that to prepare me for this. Or it may be that the gain is when we get to the judgment seat of Christ and hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. So whether you're working for somebody else, whether you're in the family business, whether you're self-employed, whether your labor is volunteering, whether your labor is making a house a home for your family, whether it's providing child care for somebody so they can do their jobs, whatever it is that is at this stage of your life that God has you doing, that's covered in this verse under the word labor. So nobody gets to check out of this message because we are all laboring. And as I was thinking about this, the Lord brought to my memory 2 Kings chapter 5. Several years ago, I was preaching through the life of Elisha. And in 2 Kings chapter 5 is the story of Naaman, the Syrian captain, who has leprosy, who goes and dips in the Jordan River and is healed of his leprosy. And I was getting ready to go into, do what God tells you to do, and if God tells you to dip 7 times, don't dip 5, and then blame God because you didn't get healed. Do what God said to do. I was getting ready to go to that part, and God said, slow down, Wilson. You're missing the key person in the whole story. And it's a little servant girl. We don't even know her name. But she is a tremendous illustration of what Solomon says, that in all labor, there's value, there's gain. 2 Kings chapter 5, starting with verse 1. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram, that's today's Syria. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master could see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." And Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said, and the king said, "By all means, go." And you're probably somewhat familiar with that story. Naaman goes, Elisha says, "Go dip in the Jordan River 7 times. And Naaman says, "I got a lot better rivers than the muddy Jordan at my home. Why am I doing that?" And somebody says to him, "Well, if he had told you to do something really exciting and profound, you'd have done that. Go dip in the river," And he does. And the first time he dips, and he's still got leprosy. And the 4th time he dips, he's still got leprosy. And the 6th time he dips, he's still got leprosy. And the 7th time he dips, and he comes up and he's whole and becomes converted and follows the God of Israel. But the heroine of this story is this unnamed young lady who said to Naaman's wife, who she was the household servant to, if he could just get to Samaria, there's a prophet there who could heal him. So what does she teach us? In all labor, there's value, there's gain. The overarching truth is God can turn bad things into good things. We all know Romans 8:28. God is at work in all things for the good of those who love him. God can turn bad things into good things. The Syrians had sent raiding parties into Israel, and this young lady, and we don't know exactly her age. That phrase is ambiguous in the Hebrew language. It could mean anything from a child to a teenager. So, most people think she was probably, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. She was not 19 or 20, and she wasn't a child. But she was taken captive to work for her enemy, Naaman, and his wife. We don't know how long she'd been in the house before this story happens. We don't know a whole lot of that chronology. But at best, she's a teenager. Now, I don't know what kind of a teenager you were. I know what kind of a teenager I was. I'm fortunate to be alive. My parents are incredibly patient people. Most teenagers, aren't the most mature people, in our age. And it would have been easy for her, because think now, she's a teenager, she's taken captive, she's yanked out of her nation, she's yanked out of her home, she's yanked away from her family and everybody and everything she knows, and on top of that, she has to go be the servant to the people who did it to her. And I don't know this, but surely she was tempted sometime as she put her head on her pillow at night to say, "I can't stand these people. Why did they do this to me? My mama taught me, that God would take care of me, and now look what's gone on. Because of them, I'm never going to be able to marry a good Jewish boy and maybe be the mother of the Messiah. Because of them, I've lost all of my friends. Because of them, I haven't seen my parents in how long." I wonder if she ever missed her mom yelling at her to clean her room. She said, "Oh, if I could just go back," But here she is, plucked out of everything she knows. But instead of getting bitter, she stayed faithful to God and to those she served. You say, "Well, how do you know that?" I know that because when she talked to them, they paid attention to her. She didn't get bitter. It would have been easy for her to say, "She wants me to clean this house. See if I clean this house. She wants me to make her bread. I won't burn her bread." She could have done whatever her responsibilities are. She could have been surly. She could have been, just mean and sour. But she wasn't. She was faithful to God, and she was faithful to Naaman and to Naaman's wife. I think that's important when it comes to our jobs, the labor, whatever it is that it takes right now. Because your labor may be a source of real frustration to you. If you're working, your job, working, what I'm talking about, for income, your job may be incredibly frustrating. If you are working volunteering, you probably feel like you're dying for some acknowledgement and encouragement. If you're retired, you found out the golden years, what a joke those are, right? And retirement sure didn't end up the way you thought it was. I think about, at Select, we see so many different kinds of people come through there. And one of our patients that we had for a while was the husband of a couple. They had retired like a month before and had gotten their camper and were out on a trip and had a serious accident. And they spent their retirement time in a hospital. My dad and mom had no idea that their retirement years would be spent with her in a nursing home in the end stages of Alzheimer's and dad taking care of her. That was not the plan for retirement. Maybe your plan for retirement hadn't worked out. You're still laboring, maybe laboring harder than you ever have. Well, remember that God can turn bad things into good things. And here this servant girl is. She has faith. She knows about Elisha, and she is where she needs to be so God can get to Naaman the message that God needs to get to Naaman, so Naaman secondarily can be healed, but primarily can be converted. And when basically the second in command, apparently, of the Syrian army becomes a follower of the God of Israel, some shaking gets done. And God wanted Naaman converted. And so he used a bad thing done by bad people, taking this young lady away from her home and taking her to captivity to accomplish his purpose. Now, I'm not telling you that God did it to her so that would happen. I'm telling you that God used what people meant for harm and turned it for good. So many times we try to figure out, well, what God trying to teach me about this and what is God doing here? Just rest, and trust. He knows what he's doing. But I'm promising you that she had to have been a good worker with a good attitude and a good spirit about her, or they wouldn't have listened to her. Can you imagine if she had been surly and lazy and sloppy in her work? When she goes to Mrs. Naaman and said, there is a prophet in Samaria that could heal him, she said, I can't believe anything you say. One of the things that hurts me as I'm out in the workplace is so many times people say to me, Ken, why is it that the people who talk the most about being Christians are the most devious, least trustworthy people in the job? Sometimes it seems that way. But this young lady was faithful to God. She was doing her best. And so when it comes time for her to say, maybe if Naaman would get to Elisha, he'd be healed, they listened to her. And that leads me to the second thing I want to say, and that is that God has you where you are to be a blessing to the people where you are, even the people who are not yet Christians. Sometimes we Christians talk about non-Christians. I kind of like the word pre-Christian, because the pre-Christian says God's going to get them, and it may very well be that there are people in your life who are not yet believers who will become believers at some point, in part because you were in their life. And there was something about how you lived your life, maybe a casual conversation you had with them, that caused them to be open to faith in God. What an example this young teenage girl is of the influence of just one person. Naaman gets healed, but more importantly, becomes a follower of the true God, a man of great influence and great position in Syria because she was faithful. God has you where you are to be a blessing to the people where you are. Whatever your social circle is through the day, work circle, people in your home, you ministering to other people, whatever the people are that God brings you in contact with, God has you in their lives to make a difference. To speak a word of encouragement, to speak a prayer, to give them a smile, to tell them you appreciate them, whatever it is, God has you there to be a blessing to them. I've told you this before. Who knows the blessing that rests on your work site because you're there? The blessing that rests on the people's lives that you interact with in your labor, whatever form that takes, because you're there. And if you're having a struggle trying to figure out how God can use you where you are, ask Him to give you some insight about that. And third, be faithful in the waiting room. Sometimes it feels that we're just kind of in a holding pattern, that God has something else for us, we're just not quite sure what it is. Stay true to God while it seems like you're just spinning your wheels. Stay true, stay faithful. I remember one time, one of my early churches, I was at a seminar, and I had felt, kind of a restlessness in my spirit that, it was at that seminar when a speaker just nailed, you want to nail a room full of preachers? Here's what you say. This was like day 3 of the seminar. He said, I know what your preachers are doing out there. He said, you've been taking notes, and you've been getting some great ideas, and you have said to yourself, if I ever get to a good church, I'm going to do this stuff. He said, God wants you to start doing it now. And I was talking to a group of pastor colleagues, and one of them said to me, Ken, God can't steer a parked car. He said, you need to do what you feel like God wants you to do, and then He can direct you where He wants you to be. And I thought, that's a pretty good word. So be faithful to God while you're waiting. And fourth, ask God for what you need as you deal with that situation that you find yourself in. It may be wisdom, it may be courage, you may need tact, whatever it is that you need for the situation you're in right now. The situation that seems like it's never going to get better, the situation that seems like I have no idea, I didn't think this was going to happen. Ask God for what you need to deal with the situation you're in, and above all else, don't lose faith. You are not wasting your life. Whatever it is He has you doing, whatever your labor is, you are not wasting your life. Whatever that stage of your life is right now, whatever form that labor is taking, God is going to use you to make a difference in the people's lives that you are touching right now. Because Jesus said, a cup of cold water given in my name has its reward. That's an amazing thing. Just giving somebody some water has its reward. And I love Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10. God is not unrighteous. He will not forget your work and labor of love. You matter to God. Your labor matters to God. Whatever form that labor is taking right now, taking care of family members, taking care of friends, whatever your labor is right now, it matters to God. And in all labor, there is value, there is gain. I told you last week about Brother Lawrence. When I was in school, they told us that if we really wanted to read a book that would cause us to really deepen our walk with God, we should read the book, The Practice of the Presence of God, by Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence was attached to a monastery. I told you last week, I thought he was one of the monks that, in his 24 hours, he prayed 8 hours a day and read the Bible 8 hours a day, But I found out he was the kitchen help. He was the cook and chief bottle washer. That's what his job was. And he has written one of the devotional classics on how to develop a sense of the presence of God as you go through your life. Not from kneeling in prayer for 8 hours a day, but from cooking and washing the pots and pans. He says in his book, and you talk about being shocked, you get into that book, you go, wait a minute, this guy wasn't a monk. Well, he was, but he was the cook. He was the kitchen help. He did pots and pans. That resonated with me because the college we attended, we had, as part of our tuition, we were required to work so many hours a week, for the school. And one of my jobs was doing the pots and pans. And so I'm going to write a book, Brother Ken. So it kind of, resonated with me. So, I'm doing pots and pans. I never felt like he did that my sink had become an altar of worship. But he says in his book that his sink of pots and pans had become an altar of worship. And here's a quote from him. The time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer. And in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great of tranquility as if I were on my knees at the sacrament. Oh my. And then he prayed, Lord of all pots and pans and things, make me a saint by getting meals and washing up the plates. In all labor there is gain. Why the scripture says, whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. In all labor there's gain. Whatever it is that God has put in your life for you to do now, do it as unto him. There will be gain. Ultimately, you will hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. Father, it's a challenge sometimes when we're in the middle of that labor, especially if it's not something that's going real well and we're kind of frustrated and people are irritating us and we're wondering what we're accomplishing. In those moments, it's hard for us to remember that we're supposed to be bringing honor to you and bringing glory to you. And this young servant girl, with her consistent, faithful life, doing her best as a servant to her nation's enemy, is such an illustration of how you can use us no matter where we are to bring glory to you and to touch the lives of other people. And so help us as we go into our day, whether we go out to our labor or whether our labor wakes us up staring us in the face, wherever our labor is, may we do it as unto you. And may we realize that it matters to you. And even something as simple as giving somebody a cup of cold water will have its reward. So help us, Father, to stay focused on you, to do everything that we do to your honor and to your glory, and allow you to flow through us to touch the lives of those that you have brought into our lives each day. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace, now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today.